What is up, guys? Rick Hackus here, and this is the blue, green, black Dredge deck. This has been going very well online, been absolutely crushing kids, and I wanted to bring you the deck tech for it. So let's kind of just go over each of the individual cards, then go over why these cards are in this deck. Alright, so first we have 3 Hedron Crabs, 4 Kraken Hatchlings, 4 Tome Scours, 4 Necromancer's Assistants, 4 Elvish Pioneers, 4 Elvish Visionaries, 4 Satyr Wayfinders, 1 Vengevine, 3 Spider Spawnings, 3 Nemesis of Mortals, and 3 Treasure Find. So actually this is like really what you want. There's a lot of 4s and stuff. There's not really a lot of 1-ofs, so that kind of shows that this deck really melds well together. Now, over in the land base, we got 4 islands, 1 swamp, 7 forests, then we have a playset of each guild gate. So 4 blue-black guild gates, 4 blue-green guild gates, and 4 black-green guild gates. So basically all the combinations of the 3 colors we have. As you can see, there's only 1 black, like actual swamp. That was just because I felt like I needed a little bit more black, and I was already had the gates I needed, so I just added 1 swamp. And yeah, like this is really all the black you need. The black is important, but it's not really like there's not much black stuff in the deck. And there is a decent amount of blue, but it's not really the most important first turn plays. You kind of want to see forest first turn. Also, there's a little bit heavier on forest because of the Nemesis of Mortals. You require double green for the Nemesis of Mortals to activate its ability and to cast it, so that's why there's a little bit green heavy. So this deck, basically the win conditions are essentially Spider Spawning, Nemesis of Mortals, and to somewhat Vengevine. So basically what this deck does is it uses cards like Satyr Wayfinder, which looks at the top 4 cards of your library, puts a land in your hand and the rest in the graveyard. Necromancer's Assistant, where when it comes into play, they put the top 3 cards of your library into the graveyard to put cards into the graveyard. Now, when cards end up in the graveyard, you're going to be able to cast stuff like Spider Spawning, put a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach onto the battlefield for each creature card in your graveyard. You want to maximize that. You're often going to be, the first time you cast it for 5, you're often going to be putting 5, 6, 7 spiders onto the battlefield. And a lot of just players you're playing, they just can't handle that amount. Not to mention, you're then going to flashback it later usually for even more. Also, getting this guy, Nemesis of Mortals, a 5/5 out on turn 3 is very, very possible. In fact, almost like 100% guaranteed if you have some cards that put stuff into the graveyard. And also activating his ability, Monstrosity 5, for it to become a 10/10 is also very, very possible. Now, other cards, Vengevine works perfectly in this deck because it has, when you cast a spell, if it's the second creature spell you cast this turn, you may return Vengevine from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this card's actually really, really good with this deck because usually what happens is you end up putting him in the graveyard somehow through a Tome Scour, through a Hedron Crab, through a Satyr Wayfinder somehow, and then you'll often, without even knowing it, cast, let's say, an Elvish Pioneer and an Elvish Visionary, and somehow out of nowhere, this 4/3 with haste pops onto the battlefield to help you out. So he's just a great card for this deck because he gets right back out of the graveyard onto the battlefield with haste. And if he dies, he can come right back by casting 2 more creatures. So this deck really, again, just works by dumping things into the graveyard and then getting the benefit of having lots of creatures in the graveyard with Spider Spawning and Nemesis of Mortals. Now, a little bit of stuff to kind of explain why they're in there. Hedron Crab, obviously, you're casting its landfall on yourself to put the top 3 cards of your graveyard into the battlefield. Tome Scour, you're doing on yourself. Like, that's why green is in here. Blue is in here. Stuff like Tome Scour and Hedron Crab are really, really good for putting things into your graveyard. The actual, like, there's a deck that it came with where it was a green-black deck with Spider Spawning and Nemesis of Mortals, and the only way to put stuff into your graveyard was Satyr Wayfinder and Necromancer's Assistant. That's nowhere near fast enough, so that's why the blue was introduced for Tome Scours and Hedron Crabs, so the amount of stuff going into your graveyard is increased dramatically. Now, stuff like the Kraken Hatchin, it's here basically to delay the game. Remember, getting a Nemesis of Mortals out turn 3 is common if you have one. You may dump all of them into your graveyard. You may not see the entire game. You're usually going to want a Spider Spawn, but Spider Spawn happens on turn 5. Turn 4, if you're lucky enough to get an Elvish Pioneer, that's why it's in here. There is enough basic lands to warrant it. I mean, it's definitely not the most useful, but a lot of cards like Elvish Visionary are kind of useful. It draws you a card. Hopefully, it'll draw you a Spider Spawning. You know, it'll get into your combo. But the reason it's in here, 4 and 4, is basically to provide creatures to the graveyard. You really need creatures in the graveyard. And so that's why you can have a thing like, let me just go to it right now, that just dumps things in your graveyard. I was originally running here it is, Chill of the Foreboding. Each player puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his graveyard and flashback. But the thing about running that is, if you're to run Chill of the Foreboding, you're running one less creature. And again, this deck works off creatures in the graveyard, not cards in the graveyard. Now, the one more thing I'm going to mention, it's super important, is Treasure Find. There's a 3 of Treasure Find. Very, very important in this deck because return target card from your graveyard to your hand, exile Treasure Find. Basically, without Treasure Find, there would be 6, you have to draw 1 of 6 things to win the game. And like, if these end up in your graveyard, it's not the worst thing in the world because you can flashback them from your graveyard. That is turn 7 though, so you're gonna have to delay the game till turn 7. The good thing about having all these semi-useless creatures, Elvish Visionaries, Elvish Pioneers, is you just block with them. Like, every time you're totally okay with blocking. You know, like, they attack with their 4/3, you block with an Elvish Visionary, your Elvish Visionary dies, adds to the creatures in your graveyard, so your Spider Spawning and Nemesis of Mortals is more powerful, and you delay the game 1 turn to hopefully find your combo. But Treasure Find allows you to, if you, it's essentially, drawing a Treasure Find is like drawing a Spider Spawning or Nemesis of Mortals, because that's usually what you're going to fetch. You're, like, 90% of the time you're going to fetch a Spider Spawning from your graveyard. You know, you accidentally dump one in, it's turn 4, and you have a Treasure Find, and you want to cast Spider Spawning on turn 5, you would find it on turn 4 with Treasure Find, and then the next turn cast it. That's basically usually what Treasure Find's for. The thing about Treasure Find is it's so useful. I've used it to grab Satyr Wayfinders if I need to guarantee land drops. I've used it to grab Hedron Crabs. I've used it to grab Tome Scours, so I can Tome Scour, Treasure Find, and Tome Scour again for maximum potential if I already have a Spider Spawning in my hand. Like, honestly, Treasure Find is just a really good tool for this deck. It's kind of, you know, whatever scenario you want to be in, it lets you get there, because it's just really good because you have so many cards in your graveyard at that point. Usually it really helps you just accelerate the combo or facilitate the combo or whatever. It really does make the whole deck come together, and that's why there's as much black as there is, because the only thing that requires black is the flashback from Spider Spawning, Treasure Find, and Necromancer's Assistant. But like, flashing back this and Treasure Find are so important, that's why there's as much black as there is. So basically, your ideal turn is you start out with like a Tome Scour or a Hedron Crab and have a Spider Spawning or a Nemesis in your hands. You just dump as much stuff into the graveyard as soon as possible, and then cast that Spider Spawning on turn 5, hopefully turn 4, because you were able to Elvish Pioneer, and essentially win from there. You're going to have so many spiders that almost no deck is going to be able to deal with it, especially when you start flashing back spiders. Your board state is essentially going to get to the point where you have, like, let's say 7 spiders on board. You just click attack with all. So you attack with all, they block, let's say 3 or 4 of them. 3 or 4 damage gets through, and then you just flash back the Spider Spawning as soon as combat's done, and then you have 10 more spiders as defenders for next turn. And you just keep doing that. Like, every turn you attack with everything you have, then you flash back or cast another Spider Spawning, you get 10 or 12 more spiders, and no deck can deal with that. And you basically just win. Now, the one thing that is going to wipe you out is something like Anger of the Gods, which does 3 damage to every creature. However, even if they do that, you usually have a Spider Spawning that you can flash back or find with a Treasure Find, or Nemesis of Mortals won't be affected by that. So this deck is just really consistent. Its win conditions are massive. You just completely overwhelm the enemy, and it's very, very fun to play. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And as always, have a good day.